Okay, everyone. So, welcome to our September 2021 Patron Discord workshop. This month, talking about running Strahd in combat and running the beautiful Castle Ravenloft. So, we're going to start by talking about the combat tactics for Strahd, a number of scenarios in general, stratagems, mindsets that I like to bring to it, as well as some specific examples. And then we'll talk about both in and out of Castle Ravenloft, how Strahd approaches that, and we'll from there move into just how I kind of conceptualize Castle Ravenloft. Though that section especially is a little more fluid because we didn't get too many questions about it before. So if as we get to Castle Ravenloft or as we're going through it, you have any specific questions, feel free to interrupt me so that we can focus on any notable points. So before we get started, is there anything that wasn't already noted in the Discord channel that you guys would just like to ask up front or make a note of so I can make sure to focus on it when we get there?
So for Castle Ravenloft, this is for me personally. My party is about to go in and potentially rescue Irina. So thinking about escape routes, things that Irina might have been able to kind of scout ahead and help warn the party, to help them kind of on their way. That would be helpful for me.
All right, I'm going to make a note of that in case I forget it. Please do remind me. Because I definitely think that's a good idea, especially Ravenloft is kind of the heist, the infiltration is a separate place from the final battle. So yeah, we can definitely get onto that. Okay.
Will it also entail using Ravenloft at like pre-end game? So like if they had to go in for something, I don't know, smaller, or like if they were trying to get the skull, um, and it's for like if it was for the tome or something to that effect, if it's something they needed to get sort of earlier in the game before they get to that last phase where it's like, okay, you're going into Ravenloft because you're you're not planning on leaving again until the whole thing's done. How to go about using it that way.
Mm-hmm. Sure, we can definitely talk about that.
Cool.
All right. So if that's all we got to start with, let's roll right in. Let me, just so you guys have something to look at, I suppose I'll screen share this. Although it's a bit of a jumbled mess of bullet points. Let me open that up here. Okay, and let me switch over in the recording as well. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Sure can.
Beautiful. Alright, so starting off with running Strahd in combat. Now, I've seen a number of posts in the subreddit, and apologies up front for any noise in my background. There's been a lot of questions, both on D&D subreddits and Strahd subreddits, about running a high intelligence enemy, because Strahd does have 20 intelligence. He is quite literally a genius, both in an arcane, historical, and a military sense. The key thing for Strahd is that he always needs to have a plan, a backup plan, and an escape route. And the plan, as we'll get to it in a second, has to relate to Strahd's goal, because Strahd does not only show up for the sake of throwing his weight around, he has an actual thing that he wants to accomplish. And the idea for Strahd is that whenever you're running a Strahd encounter, no matter what happens, Strahd should always have some way of winning, kind of a Zanato's gambit, if you've read that on TV tropes. This idea that no matter what the PCs decide, Strahd takes something favorable away from it. If they run, he gets something good out of it. If they fight, he gets something good out of it, and so on and so forth. And the escape route is obvious. Strahd needs to survive. And he is very cognizant of his status as an immortal. He does not want to die. He knows that he has an eternity ahead of him. So he is always going to prioritize his own safety and well-being above all else and make sure that he has a reliable, robust, and quick getaway option. And notably, he's not going to engage the PCs without knowing how to work through this. So, the first thing about the plans and backup plans is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Strahd is not going to make 5 interlocking plans with several different moving parts. They're going to be simple, they're going to work well, and they're going to draw on his strengths and emphasize the PC's weaknesses. So, if you're
sorry, does that go into also the idea of him trying to like uh not use more of his resources than he would need to, like sticking to third level spells if fourth level uh seems like overkill or something to that effect.
We're actually going to get to that, but
Okay,
absolutely.
cool.
Something notable for Strahd is one of the questions that I've seen is why doesn't Strahd describe the PCs every day? And the answer for that is that he's dealt with other adventurers. He knows that Van Richten is in the land, and 5th level spell slots are kind of at a premium for a ninth level caster. So he's not going to go spamming scrying, for example, when he could, make use of his spy network. And that's another part of running Strahd entirely, using his spies and intelligence. But that kind of leads us into the second bullet here, and I just want to emphasize again, thank you, Knight, for being the first, which is feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or comments. I'm just going to go like a freight train, but feel free to cut me off at any time if you have any thoughts that come to mind.
Do you think, man? Onward.
Perfect. So Strahd makes sure that he knows his enemies, and this is how you really pull the 20 intelligence out. By writing down everything Strahd learns about the PCs, whether via spies, open combat, disguises, threats, scrying, all of that needs to go down on paper. He should have a perfect view of everything on your PC's character sheets. And as long as they've either A, shown it to him, or B, shown that they may have it to him. For example, he might not know that your paladin has, say, lay on hands, but if he sees them use a divine smite, he's going to realize they're a paladin. I've fought 50 paladins before. They probably have lay on hands. Little extrapolations right like that is just filling out the general strokes, because this is a 20 intelligence guy. You should assume at all times that Strahd, at the very least, has the equivalent of the PHB floating around at the back of his head. And beyond that, he's someone who knows how to prioritize. He has specific goals, and within those goals, he has sub-goals. If he's in open combat, he's not going to wail on the tank. He's going to focus on the spellcasters. He's going to disrupt concentration, and he's going to get to the tanks last. And that's just very basic stuff. And if you've read my combat tactics guide about using cover, about focusing fire, that is where you do it. If you have felt too bad about, say, having your monsters gang up on a single PC, Strahd is where you stop being afraid to do that, and where you start having Strahd chew through your wizard in a round and a half, because it's Strahd and 8 gargoyles attacking them simultaneously. That's what Strahd does.
Strahd's not afraid to be cheap, so long as it's within the rules.
Correct. Strahd is here to win, and most of the time he's not going to be fighting to win, as we'll get to. But if he is in that fight for his life, in the finale, or so to speak, he's going to do the most efficient, the most lethal, and the most intelligent tactic possible. Ruthless as well. Just a small quick note, he's going to take advantage of any terrain he can get. He likes open spaces, because as a vampire, if he gets hemmed down in one place, even if you buff up his HP, if he's in sunlight, he's going to melt. If he's grappled, he's going to melt. This is a guy who does not like being cooped up. And any additional hazards he can make use of, as we'll get to, are ideal as well. So,
I have one question on the escape route.
Yes.
So, Strahd would, as a vampire, know that if he is destroyed, his body will go back to his coffin and it will reform. He would, in rules it's written. So, if he dies, nothing really happens, right? He's just a vampire, and he would know that. So, apart from his ego, why would he fear dying if he knows that he can't die?
And
so
that
there
doesn't
are
include like sunlight and stuff, right?
Sure. Assuming that sunlight
is
is not
dead,
present.
dead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
assuming
that's
sunlight is
evil.
not an
But
issue.
just the rogue comes and slits his throat. He dies. He goes back a day later. He cuts the rogue's throat.
Sure. So there are 3 things at play there that I would point out. The first is the distance restriction. Strahd can only go back to his coffin if he's within 2 hours of flight from his mist form, and that is actually a very bounded area. I think it reaches about as far as Bone Grinder. If he's killed in Vallaki, he can't get back to his castle in time, according to the calculations, I'm pretty sure. Like, he has 2 hours. If he's going at, 10 feet and can only take, one action, can't even take actions, he's not going to get there in time. So that's something to consider. Once the PCs get to a point where they can threaten him, and we'll get to this later, he has a very clear area of safety that he cannot leave, because if he goes beyond that, even if he's killed without sunlight, he's gone because he's not able to get back to his coffin in time. But more importantly, and these kind of go together, you mentioned his ego as well as the PCs. First off, if Strahd is an immortal, undead, vampire, general, king, lord thing, he's not going to allow himself to be killed or wounded or surprised by the PCs if he can help it. Like, he views himself as so far above them that he's not willing to leave anything up to chance, especially because he's such a great general. Unless they do such an excellent job of coaxing him, or unless it's all part of his plan, so to speak, where like it's clear that like he conveys to the PCs clearly that like he's dying intentionally because he knows he's going to reform and he's just fucking with them. I just wanted to test out their skills. Unless he does that, it would be too big a blow to his pride, because Strahd is nothing else if not proud. And the final thing is the PCs, if they see Strahd die before the final battle, if they get him down to 0 HP, that sense of horror is gone. Because they're no longer scared to fight him. They know it can be done. And so if you let them take Strahd down, even if he revives later on, that sense of horror is no longer present.
Well, we got you once. We could do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So he would return and be very angry.
He would also know if he's in the castle that he can probably be staked, I imagine.
Yes, although he's not, as written at least, he's... Well, actually, no, you're right, because if he was in his coffin, he would have an hour to recover before he's been staked. And you're actually entirely right, because imagine if at that time, while he's fucking around with the PCs, Rudolf van Richten is snuck into his castle and finds him in his coffin. Strahd is dead. He's not going to take that risk. So that's a very good point. Because that's an hour when he's powerless.
That all makes perfect sense to me. The rules as written, Strahd, in the aftermath, it says that Strahd dies, but he will return. Would he know that the Dark Powers will bring him back, even if he's dead?
I would not run it that way, either in the rules as written or the Reloaded campaign. To me, a Strahd who knows his own prison and his own condemnation and his own unconditional immortality is telling a story far different from the one in the book. I would only run that kind of Strahd if I were running a Van Richten's Guide Ravenloft campaign. I would not do that in a Curse of Strahd campaign.
All right.
Because the scope of Strahd becomes such a bigger villain if you introduce that element.
Yeah, also, I mean, think about Strahd's personality. This is a man who craves power above all else. He's not even going to think about he may think about his own mortality, but he's also thinking about it more in terms of losing power, losing everything that Strahd's worked for. So he's never going to put that at risk. So he's not even thinking about the fact that maybe he's thinking about the fact that he can die, but he's thinking about it in terms of that's something I will never let happen, right?
So Strahd's ability is something like Sauron and his One Ring, where he would never think anyone would just throw it into the volcano. It's like no one could even take it from him, even if they wanted to. And even if they did, he would be smart enough to just figure it out.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Do we want to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So we're going to talk for the moment about Strahd's combat outside of Ravenloft, and this is kind of unfolding into a more general Strahd encounters workshop instead of a Strahd combat one. So I'm going to try to go a little quickly to focus on the combat aspects. But if Strahd is outside of Ravenloft, you need to focus on what he knows before you can get anything else done. And that takes in spies, scrying, if and only if he's gotten a piece of hair or possession for the PCs, because he's not going to risk a 5th level spell slot on a spell that might fail. And anything is got from Detect Thoughts. And keep in mind, he can cast Detect Thoughts and continue concentrating on it in, say, Bat form or Mist form. So keep that in mind.
When it comes to scrying, I know a lot of folks go with the rule that basically if someone literally says Strahd, he basically gets a, air quotes, free scrying on him, or it triggers his awareness to be able to scry or something like that. How do you treat that in terms of like limits, and how long can he scry if that happens?
So I would just give a preliminary response saying that I would not do that for a number of reasons. First, that the Strahd genre of horror is a predatory, vampiric, gothic horror. It's not the ever watchful tyrant horror. I might use that if I were running, say, a game involving Azalin, but I would not do it for Strahd. If you absolutely must, I guess I would give him like a minute. But
Okay.
I think it's much more richly rewarding to focus on his spies and his own encounters, because that
Okay.
forces him to work for it and gives him real limits which are meaningful, and ups the paranoia as opposed to just making it into a kind of spooky Harry Potter, he who must not be named sort of deal.
Okay, so that's that. The whole say Strahd and you're getting watched is something you just eschew completely.
Yeah, I would not work with it. I mean, nothing against people who do. I think it's a very,
Sure.
viable way to generate paranoia and a sense of fear, but to me personally, it feels very artificial.
So
Like,
you
if
stick
I'm not saying
to
it,
like mortal spies, straight up, like
Yeah.
other entities. Okay.
Vistani,
Gotcha.
bats, wolves, etc., werewolves, druids. Yeah,
Okay.
What about
every day and
could
every
also
night,
read-
at least
He
one
can
spy.
also read. Strahd can also hang out in the astral realm, riding Galacticus, right?
Bucephalus,
spying
yeah.
people that way.
If you're choosing to use him in that way, absolutely, he can do that. Although I personally wouldn't do it unless he had some reason to be there, just because he has enough spies to take care of the job for him, and he's not going to go gallivanting just for a spying mission.
Cool.
what about oh fuck it's crying. Would it be too much to like give the people of the village of Barovia and Vallaki the fear that if they speak his name, he would be able to see them in his dreams or something? Like, they don't know magic, but even though he doesn't have the ability, would it be too much or wrong to just like foreshadow something that's not there?
So I think for me it comes down to the experience you're giving to the players. And if the players hear that Strahd can watch them when they speak his name, you're still conveying that all-seeing Sauron tyrant sort of experience, that Voldemort sort of horror vibe, quote-unquote horror, because I mean, there's a reason why toward the end of the series, and in God knows how much Harry Potter fan fiction, they call him Voldy or Moldly, because it's not actually going to carry horror once they don't fear him anymore. It's just going to be an annoyance. And so whether or not they even find out, on the player end of things, they're going to treat it as such. And that's going to change some of the experience. And also, I just don't personally feel it'd be necessarily conducive. Just because on the player side, they're still going to approach it as if it were true. Because they're never going to meet someone who tells them it's not.
So it's not having the ability, but the players knowing about the ability. So he could have the ability if no one ever knew.
I would not
that
give him the
wouldn't
ability.
take away from the horror.
I would not give him the ability even if nobody knew, largely because I feel like that's unfair, and B, I personally like it when villains have limits. That's why I keep forbiddance for Strahd, because for me, a villain who must operate through spies is both a vastly more interesting villain and a villain who's actually far scarier than a villain who just has random scrying orbs popping in and out of existence. Because there's that amount of small control that you have over it, and if you fail that control, if you're not looking closely enough, that's real fear and paranoia, and I personally really enjoyed that vibe.
So
Something
you
I'd
would also
like.
take out-
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
so you wouldn't put in the spy, like the Vistani sitting on the astral plane just chasing the party or something, because that kind of goes hand in hand, like all the time scrying.
Yeah,
like
I personally
a 2-hour delay or something.
I probably would
That
not
doesn't
do
work.
that. I mean, I personally prefer to just stick with spies once a day scrying if he has something to do with it and there's no chance of failure, and Strahd encounters. I think from my own notes, you get more than enough. You get basically most of their stat blocks and character sheets. You get their character motivations. You get their relationship with the party. The scrying doesn't really add much.
Something I'd like to look at too, maybe not this instant, maybe if we have time at a different point, is just the management of spies as well, like how to place them and use them
I am going to
most
cut you off
effectively.
there, but
Go
that's
ahead.
absolutely a topic that we could talk about in the future.
Cool, no problem.
Yep. Just because I want to make sure we're keeping track of time here.
Yep.
So, once you know what Strahd knows, you have to figure out why Strahd is here. If you've read my article on dramatic questions, this is where that comes up. What is Strahd trying to accomplish, and how did that pose some sort of obstacle or challenge to the players? For example, the Black Carriage encounter. Strahd is here because he wants to greet the PCs, let them know who he is, take their blood, and test them in a way to see if they break or resist or fall under his charms. If he's attacking the Blue Water Inn, maybe he's there because he wants to let them know that they're not safe from him in Vallaki, for example. Maybe that's why he's there. Those are what I would call quote-unquote encounters on the road. There are two other notable encounters. There's St. Angel's Feast and Yester Hill. St. Angel's Feast is noteworthy in that if you're running Strahd as the boss for that fight, he's not actually there for the PCs. The vampires are there killing Vallachian commoners, and Strahd is there to kill Father Lucian. And once they do that, they're gone. Strahd has zero interest in the PCs while he's doing that. So you could run a brief round of combat there, but I personally find it much more interesting and horrifying if Strahd is not there for the PCs. Yester Hill, he's there to keep the druids alive, but he's not there to stick his neck out for them, so I would personally just have him kind of fling firebolts or fireballs from the top of Bucephalus. And, obviously if his horse is wounded, he's going to ride away into the night. So, keep a sense of perspective about what he's trying to do.
That seems to also fall into him being a good general in that basically in war you want to always keep in mind that there is an objective, a reason for why you're doing what you're doing. If you don't know what that is, you're going to get your ass kicked.
Absolutely. 100%. We're going to get a little bit more to the preparatory phases, but I think that's incredibly important, which is that Strahd is not doing anything without a reason. If you're like, and I've done this before, where you're like, oh, Strahd hasn't seen them in a while, I guess it's time for a Strahd encounter. Pause, look down at your notes, figure out what Strahd knows, and then figure out what Strahd wants. Because he's not going to show up for Sunday tea or because he was bored, he's going to show up because there's something he wants to accomplish. That might be something physical, maybe there's something he wants to do to hurt or take away from the PCs, maybe he wants to send a message like, hey, Vallaki's not safe, maybe he's just there to torment them and, rip open their minds and taunt them with the dark secrets he finds using the Detect Thoughts spell. Seriously, Detect Thoughts is crazy good on Strahd, please use it. Any number of reasons, but he's got to have a reason for what he's going, and that's where the plans and the backup plans come in. With that said, this kind of comes in a bit later, Strahd's stat block has a lot of powerful tools that I like to use to kind of slowly build up over time, because ideally you want Strahd to meet the players several times through the campaign. I personally, like having anywhere from 3 to 6 Strahd encounters between level 1 and level 10. So, and the nice thing about these encounters is that you can very slowly build up and scaffold Strahd's capabilities as a villain, as I think Pate Knight said, where he's not going to use any more effort than he needs to take on the PCs. So at a very low level, he's relying on his charm, because they're weak-willed, he's bending them to his will. He's going to use his bite, his unarmed strike. He might summon fog, use his Children of the Night. He might use his sleep spell to separate or isolate them or manipulate them in a way that he likes. There was an encounter in Twice Bitten that never came about, but it basically involved Strahd, because it felt too clunky in Force, but it basically involved Strahd luring the PCs to Vokter House and having ghouls underneath the dirt, and then summoning a fog cloud, and then casting a sleep spell and taking away one of the PCs to another location. And it was a really cool idea, because at that low level, sleep actually works to that extent. And of course, the forbidden aspect, which is huge. I feel like at low level, you want to convey that Strahd cannot enter without an invitation, not because that makes him weaker, but because it gives him interesting things to do to force or incentivize the PCs to let him in. And we're going to talk about incentives later. It creates this fascinating mini-game that is absolutely terrifying for low-level PCs. At mid-level, you start bringing in more stuff. This is your levels 4, 5, 6, 7. You start using legendary resistances because, hey, guess what? The PCs now have, things like Polymorph. Or they might have things like Hold Monster. Who knows? Maybe not Hold Monster. That's more high level. But, things that could incapacitate him in some way. And that's where those are going to start to emerge. You've got Heart of Sorrow, the regeneration you really want to highlight. Obviously, Detect Thoughts is good if you haven't used it already. Animate Dead, really psych up that profane arcana. Fireball is good here. Legendary actions. Even Comprehend Languages. If your players are using ciphers or speaking in code, Strahd can just say, hi, I understand what you're saying. I understood the whole time. Get fucked, kids.
How would you highlight the regeneration from Heart of Sorrow different than a typical vampire regeneration?
Mm-hmm. So I tend to distinguish by speed and by appearance. The Heart of Sorrow I tend to signify I forget if it's the book or something on Reddit that suggested this, but I thought it was a great idea, which is the Heart of Sorrow is instant regeneration with this sort of red crystalline energy, whereas regeneration is just, the flesh slowly sealing up on its own. So the Heart of Sorrow I treat more like lycanthrope regeneration, where, say, if you stab Davian Mardukov with a non-silvered blade, you're going to cut him, but it's going to instantly heal in the blink of an eye. So that's my approach to the Heart of Sorrow, just indicating that it's something different. It's absorbing the damage, so to speak. You can also portray it as, say, sort of a crystalline shield, some kind of crystalline energy absorbing the blow, anything that conveys that this is some sort of external force that is negating the attack for him.
He's always got that the brooch or whatever with the ruby. You can kind of do like a Melisandre approach to where you just toss in a little bit of flavor about, you could have the ruby glow a little bit or something like that too.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think that could be a very cool way to kind of just diegetically show that in the world. And once the pieces get to a high level, you start opening in some of the higher power things. The Blight spell is great for disrupting concentration. Greater Invis is good if he needs to make a getaway or sneak up in sunlight. Polymorph, not the PCs, but his companions especially. Giant Aperhodden, as we all know and love. Animate objects actually can come up at low levels. In the Blue Water encounter I ran, if the PCs did not allow him entry, Strahd, in addition to sending his, having his minions resume their attack, he would have animated the lanterns inside of the tap room and had them start attacking the PCs until they decided to invite him in, or until he got bored. So animate objects, I think, is because of it's a high-level spell, but it is a low-level aesthetic. So I would definitely consider using animate objects at low level as sort of a trump card, because it's got that low-level feel, but it's a very powerful spell that Strahd can use to kind of show his arcane supremacy there. And Spider Climb is here not because it's particularly powerful, but because it is a sheer utility spell that looks incredibly undignified. Not a spell, a feature that looks undignified. And it's like it or not, if Strahd is climbing up walls, he's going to look like an absolute nerd. And Strahd does not want to look like an absolute nerd, he wants to look cool. Strahd, like Anakin and Darth Vader, wants to look cool. And Spider Climb does not look cool. So he's only going to use it if he absolutely has to.
So,
one thing...
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay, so I have a question about the Heart of Sorrow. Do you think that Strahd should keep the Heart of Sorrow alive until the late game, or is it because at the late game 50 hit points is not that much, of course. Strahd is a glass cannon. Do you think that the Heart of Sorrow is a thing to be destroyed or in the mid game, or should he really try and keep it until the late game, making sure that his amulet is turned off as a bonus action, of course, until he dies basically?
Yeah, so my general approach to the Heart of Sorrow is that from around levels 3 to 6, he's going to have it on, and he's going to keep it on until he takes 25 points of damage. Because 25 HP is that buffer he wants to use to keep the Heart of Sorrow alive, so as soon as it takes 25 damage, he's going to cut the link. He's not really going to use it from levels 7, 8, maybe 9, just because, again, the pieces are too powerful for it to be worthwhile. It's only going to deflect one hit and might break before we can act. But at 10th level, in the final battle, I would keep it on, because even absorbing one radiant blow at a key moment is incredibly powerful. So.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one thing about polymorph, because we were talking on the server about chucking people out of Castle Ravenloft's windows and leaving them to fall. And I was talking to my players about polymorph, and they didn't know how to use it offensively on your enemies. Would you say turning the enemy wizard into a toad and chucking the toads out of Castle Ravenloft is a viable strategy? Because it is a high place, you fall like 500 feet around. It would take them out of the battle it would probably take them out of the battle. They would land, even if they survived, they would have to fly back up. It takes a while. Is that too evil, taking a PC and a player out of the final battle, or is it acceptable?
So I would say no to your first question, yes to your second. In the final battle, if you get to defenestrate a PC as Strahd using Spider Climb and unarmed strikes, absolutely do that every single time. I will never not yeet a PC out of the window as Strahd in the final battle. But the polymorph, it's just not good enough. It's a 4th level spell slot. He's only got 3 of those. They get a save against it. Savvy players will know to damage the character before Strahd can do anything with them. Your only option is to turn them into a killer whale or something with a lot of hit points, and then he can't eat them anymore. They're just kind of there. It's far better, especially in terms of action economy, if you either use it on Rahad to turn him into a giant ape, or a T-Rex or something, or use it on a vampire spawn to turn them into, say, a giant crocodile. Especially because, if you use it on a vampire spawn, guess what? They're no longer vulnerable to sunlight anymore. So, polymorph is very good with your allies, but I personally think that using against your enemies is a bit of a trap. It's funny and it feels good, but it's not. Someone like Strahd would not use it. It's not reliable enough.
Okay, but you would totally go for the death saves, take the downed PC and just kill them to take them out of the fight indefinitely.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, if he felt like there was a danger of them being brought back up from 0, I think he would absolutely do that. As long as you think your players are on board for that.
Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm. So, once you've kind of built up this encounter, you've got to, again, draw on that 20 intelligence Strahd. You've got to prepare for potential PC reactions. And obviously, there are 3 ways to do it. The PCs might fight, they might flee, or they might freeze. Fight. And this kind of outlining and preparation, obviously you're not predicting exactly, but knowing your PCs, knowing what they might do and preparing for potential eventualities, you don't have to spend a lot of time, but at least thinking through the possibilities will really help you sell Strahd as this prepared, savvy villain. If the PCs are fighting back, it's important to think of where the PCs are. If the PCs are at a low level, Strahd can just take them down with an overwhelming strike. He's not going to cast Fireball at a 4th level PC who's spat on his feet. He's going to backhand it with an unarmed strike and say, learn respect for your betters. Or something like that. If the pieces are at a higher level, let's say 5 or 6, he's going to fill the ground between them with walls of minions that are attacking commoners, attacking allies, and attacking the PCs. And maybe he's not going to fight them himself, because, in my games, I don't think Strahd needs to be actively attacking the PCs, at least not in open combat until, level 7, 8, 9, 10. But if the PCs are fighting back and they are at a level where they could feasibly, maybe not kill Strahd, but do some damage to him, having that padding of minions makes very helpful. And proper preparation is really key. Using your Wall of Fogs, Animate Dead, summoning your Children of Night. The Children of Night alone make it so powerful for Strahd to attack after dark, which is really when he should almost always show up. Because bringing all those bats or wolves or I would never use the rats, I don't think they're just unimpressive. But the bats and the wolves are just really great. The bats can use the help action, the wolves can attack and drag things away and knock them prone. It's just great. So lean on the stat block, set things up before you ever take the first shot. In my Krezk encounter, Strahd literally brought a bunch of ghouls to the teleportation brazier, went down the hill, had his ghouls dig up the Krezkov's kids, used Animate Dead to turn them into zombies, used Children of the Night to conjure up a small army of wolves, and then used Fog Cloud to fill the area, and then cast Fireball in the cottage once everything was set up. He is careful, he is deliberate, and he is thorough. The only limitation that Strahd should ever face is not being able to concentrate on more than one spell at a time. And really, if you've got Fog Cloud, you don't need anything else. Because Upcast Fog Cloud is huge. If the PCs decide to flee, for example, hiding behind the front door of a house because Strahd can't get in without an invitation, you've got a lot of options. Obviously, there's Charm, and Strahd is going to use Charm and lean on that as heavily as he can. I've gone back and forth on this because Charm might not be fun for a lot of players, but I felt that letting them roleplay it the first time and then giving them a decision of whether or not to meet his gaze makes for much more interesting gameplay. Because that really plays into that sort of predatory nature of the vampire and as a genre trope.
But once they're charmed, once they're charmed, they, even if they didn't know before, they know, okay, don't look them in the eye.
Well, not necessarily. I usually use Ismark and Irina to tell them how it works, or Esmeralda and Van Richten saying, oh, you were mind controlled by Strahd. That's because, if you look at a vampire's eyes, they can mind control you. And I would either warn them, I would probably try to warn them up front if they took to Ismark and Irina and they had a Strahd encounter with them nearby. So I would always have that as an option to let them know, do you meet his eyes or not? And if they don't, and if you think they're not likely to, incentives are so much more powerful than threats. This is what I call the mousetrap principle. Strahd, picture this. You're a cat, and your job is to hunt mice. You go up to a hole in the wall, and you knock on the door. Let's say, Tom and Jerry. And you're like, hey, mouse, I'm here to hunt you. Come on out. And the mice say, no, you can't get through the door. I'm not coming out. And then you just kind of like, you're so mad, you burn the wall down, or you punch through the wall, or like you kind of grab a mouse and then haul it out, or like you wait for them to come out. Like, it just looks weak. It doesn't look impressive. That's why you put them in a trap. You say, oh, you want to stay in there? That's fine. I filled it with rat poison this morning. Or, okay, you can stay there. In the meantime, I'm going to go to your friend mouse who's over on the other side of the room and eat them slowly. Strahd, if the player staying inside is something that Strahd wants to avoid or wants to punish, he's not going to retaliate against them for doing so. He's going to make it untenable for them to stay there. So, for example, if he knows that they're not going to be able to be charmed, and if he knows that he won't be able to coax them out, and if he knows that they're going to fortify themselves against zombie hordes, he's not going to, like, say, damn you all, I'm going to burn you with Fireball. No, he's going to cast Fireball first. And then when they walk out, he's going to say, hi, I'm out here. Good to see you. Because if he casts Fireball afterward, he looks petulant, he looks petty, he looks weak. The encounter should never start.
Forgiveness and ask permission.
Exactly. Strahd will never start an encounter unless he knows that there's approximately 0% chance that what he wants to happen will happen. Or that he doesn't want to happen will not happen.
Could you give one more example on that? Because someone on the text chat mentioned a while ago that they had a very underwhelming first Strahd encounter in the village of Barovia. The PCs stayed the night, and Strahd showed up and was like, hey, peace, let me in. And the PCs were like, no, and they shut the door, and nothing happened. What would you do if Strahd was in the village of Barovia? He knocked, he was like, hey, how you doing? And then the PCs shut the door. Just go to the neighbors and kill them slowly?
So I think for me it comes down to that central question of what is Strahd's goal? When Strahd shows up at the village of Barovia in the Burgomaster's house, what is he trying to do? Like, for me, if he's showing up to the Blue Water Inn, he's trying to show them that Vlaki's not safe. He's got lots of means to do that. He might burn it down. He might send his minions in to break the windows and doors. He might, do any number of things to make staying there untenable for the PCs. If he wants to show them that they can't stay in Krezk and hide out from, he's going to burn down the cottage they're staying in. Like, that's just, he has goals. He's going there with a purpose, and it's not going to be the PC's decision as to whether he accomplishes that or not. He's just going to do it. So at the Burgomaster's house, let's say that there's some reason for him going. This is why I prefer the Black Carriage encounter, because they can't, if they're at the crossroads, they can't hide behind a wall, or they can't hide behind a door if that's their first meeting. But if you absolutely wanted that to be the first meeting, then you got to figure out, what does Strahd want to accomplish here? Because he's not going to get Irina. He knows that doesn't work. It's boarded up. It's 4 or 5. There's no people here. If he wants to meet the PCs, like, again, the Black Carriage is strictly better than that. And with Strahd, part of the thing is like slowly ramping it up. So for me, if I absolutely wanted him to be at the Burgomaster's house, I might have him like deliver a gift or something, I guess. Because like really, it's a matter of like, what does he want to accomplish? And does he want the PCs to think that he's a good guy? Does he want to give them something that he can use to scry on them? What is he looking to accomplish here? And I think part and parcel of making Strahd encounters is being willing to scrap ideas that don't work. Like I mentioned about the Wachthouse encounter. I tried workshopping that for like an hour before I just threw it in the trash because it just wasn't working. The Black Carriage encounter was originally very different, and I wound up throwing it in the trash and making something entirely different that I was much prouder with. And so if you're like, oh, Strahd wants to, introduce himself to the PCs and take their blood and kind of, spook them a little bit and, really flex on them, sure, you can do that at the Burgomaster's mansion, but is there a better place to do that? And if there is a better place to do that, quote, perhaps the Black Carriage, then you gotta trash that encounter idea and come up with another one.
Sometimes you gotta kill your darlings.
Exactly. So keeping a focus on what the dramatic question is, because ultimately dramatic questions are player facing, right? It's a matter of, can the PCs get to the Ember Temple before Casimir is lowered into a boiling vat of acid, right? That's what a dramatic question is. And so If the dramatic question is just, will the PCs allow Strahd to enter the Burgomaster's mansion? Like, the answer is obviously no. There's no tension there. There's no drama there. There's no question. That's not a good Strahd encounter. Versus, will the PCs avoid falling under Strahd's hypnotic gaze and avoid triggering his rage and the horde of wolves he has with him? Like, that's a much more interesting dramatic question.
That makes sense.
And then the final thing, option for if the PC's freezing, just kind of resign themselves to Strahd, like, oh, he's not going to kill us. Let's just give him what he wants. We can't get away. That's where you really like pull the lever hard. Detect thoughts, manipulate them, gaslight them, abuse them. Like, one of my favorite Strahd moments in Twice Bitten was when the PC, like, Amity finally like breaks and invites them into the Blue Water Inn and says, look, yes, you can come in. Just take whatever you want, then leave us alone. And he says, good. I like the taste of your blood. Can I have it again? And Aetherndur's like, look, you're going to take her blood anyway. Just take my blood. And Strahd's like, okay, I'll take your blood. And Aethernder gets there, all ready to give blood. And then Strahd just slashes him across the chest, sends him to the ground unconscious, says, like, absolutely pathetic. I expected better of you. And then he fucks off. Because Strahd's not going to give you what you want. If you're resigning yourself to it, he's going to change the stakes. He's not going to let you be in control. So, just kind of keep that in mind. Plenty of potential outcomes. I'm just going to briefly touch on this because we're going pretty long. Strahd wins, as in the book, if he just kind of just hangs around for 2 to 4 rounds, does whatever he wants, then leaves, that's fine. Just keep in mind of how he leaves. Sometimes maybe he'll want to be at a tactical retreat without clearly indicating to the PCs that he's sincerely worried. A tactical retreat, just keep in mind for Strahd, that he's never going to let himself become bloodied or start like taking more damage than he can regenerate, especially outside of the castle. If he flees, he's got 3 main ways to do that. Rules is written, he's got mist form and he's got bat form. Plus, legendary actions in bat form. In other media, he technically has Bucephalus. The big thing here is that mist form seems good, but is actually terrible. It is incredibly slow. It is still visible. I would not use mist form unless either A, the PCs aren't going to attack him as he retreats, i.e. because it was a diplomatic meeting, or B, if he's cast Fog Cloud and then shape changes inside of the Fog Cloud. Because it's just so slow and so weak, and especially if there's sunlight around him while he's mist form, he's just going to die. Bat form is slightly better, but 30 feet flying speed is just not that great. So my overall advice is, under the Strahd is defeated, like, don't let him be defeated. Don't attack unless his victory is assured. If things start to go in a way you didn't expect, get him out of there as soon as possible and leave some kind of like, haha, adventurers, I'll be back another day, kind of like threat hanging in the air so that it seems intentional, even though it was, a little more than you thought he was ready for. And that's why having a goal is so important, because if you can accomplish that goal and then get out as quickly as possible, your players will still feel like shit, even if Strahd came off as a little weaker than you expected. So, I would not attack with Strahd unless he's very sure of his victory or he's very sure of getting what he wants. Especially once the sun sword becomes a game element, or any sort of form of sunlight. People will notice that in Twice Bitten. Once the players got the sun sword, they have not had a single combat encounter with Strahd. They encountered him once at the Blue Water Inn, and Lilith encountered him another time. But he's not actually fought them or engaged them in combat. Why? Because they have the sun sword. He's not stupid. He knows that if he gets caught in sunlight, he's fucked. And he has other better ways of dealing with them. So, and if you want to spice it up, if you want to have him reform anywhere in Barovia, I've seen some people kind of speckle Barovia with backup coffins that he can go to if he dies. And let him do that even if he dies of sunlight. You can do that, especially if you want more high level combats between him and the PCs. But really, it's I personally prefer it when he's more of a intelligent tactician instead of kind of resorting to those moments, because it still involves him dying in front of the PCs and getting KO'd, which makes him far less impressive. As I mentioned, the Keep Strahd Alive, the Heart of Sorrow. I'm just going to touch on these real quick. Legendary resistances, pick your battles with these things. He has a very high wisdom save. He's not going to lose most wisdom saves, which are the big dangerous things, say Hypnotic Pattern. He's only going to use his legendary resistances on things that might actually immobilize him, that might charm him. Anything that's going to put him at the PC's mercy is something he's not going to allow happen. That's what those LRs are for. both, again, for ego reasons and for tactical reasons. So save those LRs. And legendary actions, just in general, being able to move 120 feet around with legendary actions plus regenerating at the beginning of your turn outside of sunlight is just so much more powerful than dealing additional damage with unarmed strikes and bites. Not least because bites are shit on Strahd's stat block. Like, Strahd is about attrition. He's going to outlast anyone he fights. So, like, unless there is a prime opportunity for him to just sort of tear into a single exposed, isolated, weak, squishy PC with, like, 4 unarmed strikes in a single round, just keep him moving really quickly. Like, I know it's kind of funny, he looks like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it's so much more powerful. So, moving into Castle Ravenloft.
The legendary resistances. We talked with Mayhem about it earlier today. It's monks. It's the stunning strike.
Yes, 100%.
He is not immune to being stunned, and he only has 3 legendary resistances. And the monk could theoretically do it 10 times. How would you deal with exactly that ability?
Spider climb.
Kill the monk?
Spider climb. If I'm on the ceiling in the middle of a 30 by 30 foot room, you can't hit me.
I mean, at 9th level, the monk gets walk on walls.
Yeah, but you can't walk on the ceiling.
Which is not spider climb, true. Alright, so don't get cornered, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, stay out of range.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alright.
Cool. Inside of Castle Ravenloft, so we're going to kind of take a different tack here, because Castle Ravenloft has a specific 3 to 4 step process that Strahd just kind of rotates through. And this is true whether using rules as written or reloaded. I can't speak for other stat blocks, though I know that a number of them seem to echo reloaded in style, if not specific content. But this is a pretty routine cycle that is very powerful for Strahd to take. And I know, Shelling, you asked a question about this earlier, so I'm going to get to that about the mistake that I made when running it the first time. So the most powerful thing about Strahd in Castle Ravenloft is that his stealth modifier is absolutely ludicrously high. Let me actually pull that up here so I can just confirm how high it is. I think it's like plus 14. Yeah, he has a plus 14 stealth modifier. He's not going to be found. Especially if he's, say, in bat form, or in mist form, or even just his own form, you know, say, with greater invisibility, or perhaps spider climbing onto the top of a dark ceiling in a large chamber or around the corner, or phasing. The players are not going to see him coming, so he's going to surprise them every time. And notably, if you randomize, so the 4 steps of combat for him are ambush, attack, harass, and retreat. And you just kind of cycle through these within the castle. Because he is ultimately a guerrilla fighter. And you can change that to make him more of a tank, but like, short of like giving him like 400, 500 hit points, you're not going to make him a tank. He's just, especially with sunlight involved, he's just way too squishy. I gave him like 260 hit points and reloaded, and he still had to retreat and go through the cycle 2 times. 3 times, actually. So the first thing you do is hide. And then the important thing about this is that he strikes when you don't expect it. I formalize this by rolling 2d4. That's how many rounds he takes before popping out again. And the important thing about this is that this randomization, this ambush and these surprises, makes it that the PCs cannot ready leveled spells or item abilities. Because if you ready a hold monster, or if you ready a hypnotic pattern, if he doesn't appear by the end of the round, you waste that spell slot. If you ready... Actually, no, with the Holy Symbol, you can actually ready it without spending the charges, I think. I'd have to double check. But with spells, like, you just can't ready those spells, because they will go away if he doesn't show up in enough time. So don't give them a clock, don't give them a timer, just attack randomly from darkness. His perception lets him track the PCs easily. You can have him track them through the walls if he's using phasing, if you're using rules as written. Maybe he's in his mist form or bat form, following them from behind, just watching them. Especially in bat form, because he can use his charm from there. So the PCs just hear, you know, the wings of a bat behind them, and they turn around and they see dark red eyes in the darkness 30 feet away, because, you know, you're at the last part of the party, and you just, you know, see this bat out of the sunlight of the sun sword. That's a wisdom saving throw. That's a charm right there. It doesn't look like Strahd, but it's just a bat that's looking at you. And especially in the crypts that are so full of bats, that's like infinite charm whammies right there. Which is why it's so important to set it up, you know, at low level so the PCs know what Strahd can do. That's literally why in Twice Bitten, I, as much as I could to do it, showed the PCs that Strahd can charm people while in bat form, because he's gonna do it. and it's gonna feel bad. So don't look at the bats. Using spider climb to avoid melee attackers like the monks, getting into position. And one of the things that I love to do to start things off, if you can manage it, is if the wizard is inspecting something in like the dining room and the rest of the party is in the study, just use that lair action to slam the door shut and lock it. And then it's just Strahd and the wizard alone in the dining room. That wizard's gonna die. Or at least lose a lot of hit points. And anything that Strahd loses, he can regenerate after he gets away in stage 4, which we'll get to. So you've ambushed the PCs, you got surprised, they didn't have any readied stuff. If they had the holy symbol, and this is the part where I went wrong, which was I thought that if Strahd attacked from hiding, he could do his thing and attack before any readied spells went off. I was wrong. So, I mean, they can ready cantrips. But as soon as Strahd appears and he's visible, things like Firebolt, things like crossbows, things like the Holy Symbol, assuming that the charges don't get expended, I need to check that. Those things go off before he's able to do anything. The thing that made him really unbeatable was that I played it so that he could emerge, cast Fireball, and then the triggered actions went off, but the ordering I realized was wrong, because the triggered actions go off first. But that's still a very powerful strategy, because once you get into attack range, after you've tracked the PCs down, maybe you've charmed 1 or 2 of them, you've isolated them, you're attacking from surprise and hiding. Guess what? Unarmed strike, grapple them, defenestrate them, throw them out a window, drag them to the top of the tower, and yeet them off after spider climbing. You don't even have to push them, just to pull them down onto the wall using a 2-foot 3-arm spider climb and just drop them. Fireball, Fireball is always beautiful. Chip them down, get them down. A single Fireball before vanishing and then coming back. A single Fireball, vanishing, coming back. That's nuts. The players don't have regeneration. They have limited hit dice, let alone hit points. That's incredibly abusive. Locking down Strahd and wearing him down over time and relentlessly pursuing him is the only way you're going to come out on top. Grappling him, imprisoning him in some way, that's part of the reason why I hate the phasing rules as written, because it is so hard to corner him unless you somehow grapple him while he's in sunlight. Because he can just get away and just regenerate and then come back later. At least with the reloaded stat block, he has to retreat in a certain direction, which you can feasibly follow him down. He's moving quickly with his legendary actions, but you can at least make an attempt to follow him where he's leading.
So do you actually, unless someone is really trying to do a twice bitten sort of thing where they're sticking 100% to raw, do you actually advise going with the reloaded version?
Yeah, I think reloaded, it feels better to fight against. It's a lot fairer. It plays to those dark fantasy elements. It has some nice Castlevania flavor in there. And it's just a more fair fight. It feels like a fight that you expect to fight against a high-level vampire. You're weaving through the castle, you're chasing him all over, you're triggering traps and lots of magic spells. And there's several cycles and phases. But it's still fundamentally fair. Strahd has to play by the same rules that you do. And I think that's really important.
Sure.
Talking about the rules, going back to the Blue Water Inn, where I believe you did the wisdom saves in bed form privately. So at least we as the audience didn't know, and I don't think players not involved knew that anyone made a wisdom save. Would you, in Castle Ravenloft, when all going down and Strahd charms the players as a bet, call for open wisdom saves, or still do it secret?
I would absolutely do it in secret. I mean, it'd be obvious, but if the players act to it at all, it'd be metagaming. And I would shut that shit down.
All right.
Cool. And, if you've isolated a player, again, a squishy wizard, then just, instead of Fireball, because that wastes a spell slot, just absolutely tear them apart with, 5 legendary action unarmed strikes in a single turn. They will go down. That is a lot of damage. And then just leave. Because the next phase is retreat, and harass is just kind of more of the same, so we're not going to really get into that. You can read the Reloaded Guide to Ravenloft if you want more information about that phase. It's not important. But retreat is very important because, again, this cycle is a cycle. It is ambush, attack, retreat. And getting out of there is even more important than getting in there in the first place. Rules as Written has phasing, which, again, is dumb as hell, and I hate it, but I'm obliged to mention it. Misty Step is what Reloaded gives him. If he's grappled or something, he needs a way to get out of a tight spot, he can use that. Generally speaking, it's preferable for him to shape change into a bat and get away that way, especially with flight. But if he can't do that because he's in sunlight, for example, then greater invisibility will work just fine, because that stealth score is absolutely bonkers. Ideally, what Strahd wants to do is regenerate his full hit points and then come back later. With phasing, that's trivially easy. With the reloaded, it's a bit harder, and if your players give good chase and play intelligently, they can definitely chase him down, put him on the ropes. But yeah, if you're running as written with phasing, like, he's gonna like attack them, he's gonna go away for like a minute, and then he's gonna come back with full hit points, and it's gonna be ludicrous. But yeah, that cycle of ambush, attack, retreat, ambush, attack, retreat, and especially because we'll get to this in a second, he's luring them to parts of the castle where he wants them to follow. Because again, remember, Strahd has a purpose, a plan, and a backup plan. He's not just hitting them to hit them. He's retreating in a tactical manner because he wants them to follow him to a place that's not going to be good for them. And we're going to get there in a second. Any questions or comments? I thought I heard something. All right, I'll take that as a no. So those areas of the castle that he wants to lure the PCs to, just a brief, non-exhaustive list. The Great Entry with the gargoyles and the Red Dragon Wormling statues. If he gets the PCs in there and they trigger those traps, that's a lot of action economy that Strahd just got. If he gets them onto the tower roof, it is trivially easy to grapple them, drag them off the side, and then just drop them. You'll have to keep track of all the different roofs in Ravenloft, because like not all of the falls go all the way to the bottom, but like in general, it's a lot of fun. The elevator trap, either by spider climbing around it and forcing them to follow across it, or by something I like doing is like legendary action, unarmed striking 2 PCs, grappling them and pulling them onto the elevator trap, triggering it for all 3 of them, and suddenly he and 2 PCs are alone in the elevator trap, moving like 4 stories up. That's a lot of running the others have to do to catch up with them, and during that time, even if he fails his save against falling asleep, which he won't, he's got legendary resistances, he's fine. And the PCs will probably be asleep, so they're gonna die. He might lure them to the catacombs, where he can use his door-opening legendary action to swing open the doors and let the Wraith out, or the Hellhounds, or whatever. I say Defenestration for the Heart of Sorrow. I don't think he would want to lead them to the Heart of Sorrow, but if he must, he can. Because again, he can just grapple them and drop them. Something I like doing, I really love doing this with vampires in the Heart of Sorrow Tower, is just fucking suplexing them. Where you grapple them, and then you just yeet yourself and the person you're grappling off onto the floor. Because guess what? They're going to come along with Strahd, or the vampire that's grappling them, fall like 80 feet, take 8d6 damage, and then guess what? Strahd's just going to get up and walk away and regenerate it all, and your player's going to be down like, I don't know, 20, 30 hit points. And Strahd's going to just drag them with him, and suddenly, you know, he's 80 feet away from the Sun Sword. That PC's going to die. And then just the Brazier Room, you know, I like pinging a little ray of frost at the iron golems there to shut the doors, poison gas to seep through, especially if you can mist form out under the door and escape that way while the PCs are trapped in there. That's a really satisfying moment and absolutely terrifying for the PCs. So Strahd's moving around with purpose. That actually brings us to Castle Ravenloft. So before we do that, any questions about Strahd in combat?
Maybe one fun question. How many PCs do you think you could kill in a battle you just described in Rules as Written?
In Rules as Written Curse of Strahd, I could probably TPK... Like, if I were going all out, and this is honestly going to be a big struggle for me in Twice Bitten, because I'm going to try to play it just suboptimally enough that I don't win, I could probably guarantee a TPK, especially against most like boilerplate D&D parties, like 80% of the time with this strategy.
So
just the
even if
phasing
you have, like,
alone.
6 or 7 players.
I mean, it doesn't, like, the numbers don't matter. If there were 15 players, it wouldn't matter. All that matters is like the number of holy symbol charges they can get, because they're not going to be able to ready hold monster or like hypnotic pattern spell slots, because like Strahd will just wait like 8d8 rounds so that they can't do it. He'll just pop in every 15 minutes instead of every 1 minute. So they'll never have anything notable readied up. He's never going to let them get a short rest. He's never going to let them get a long rest. So like, unless you play them just stupidly enough, or unless they have like a wall of force, or unless you have him make a mistake at a critical juncture, just like slightly overexposing himself, no matter how many PCs there are or what their DPS is, like I can pretty much guarantee a TPK a large amount of the time. So you've got to,
Could you
again, that's why I hate rules as written.
Yeah, well, let's say that you do have a TPK. I mean, is the campaign just at that point? I'm kind of hesitant to get into a TPK. You know,
Right.
I don't necessarily want to. My players have pretty clearly said they don't want to deal with the dark powers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
mean,
just trying to avoid going that route.
I mean, that's why I run the Reloaded. And it's a lot easier if you haven't already indicated that Strahd can use phasing, because it's really the phasing that makes it so incredibly unfair. If Strahd has to follow the same rules as the PCs in terms of movement, I could probably guarantee a TPK maybe 10 to 15% of the time, depending on how intelligently I played him. And depending on what the party makeup was. It's really that idea of being able to wait a random number of rounds so they can't ready anything, popping out from anywhere he wants, that incredible hide score so we can just like stealth out and get surprised in the PCs, and just constantly ducking behind a sheer stone wall to regenerate back to full, then popping back in whenever he wants while he wears the PCs down. It's that just infinite attrition that's the problem. So if you don't want a TPK, use the Reloaded stat block or something comparable. There are many. But the rules is written stat block, I mean, if you're not playing it the way I've described, the rules is written stat block will crumple like wet tissue paper. But if you're using this strategy, you will have to make a conscious effort not to TPK your players.
Got it.
I do have a question, but maybe we're going to get into this later. How do you handle NPCs in the castle, like Rahaden? He also has a +14 on stealth. I just checked, and like I know rules is written in twice, but you're probably going to just let him be in his study until the PCs encounter him. But is it really unfair to say that Rahaden would patrol the castle and he would know if Strahd would probably tell him if the PCs would infiltrate the castle or are in the castle for the dinner, and Rahaden probably wouldn't be just in his study there. How would you handle that?
So I started 3 responses to that. The first one, just logistically speaking, if you're using the random encounter tables, like Castle Ravenloft is big, and that's reflected by the fact that if the PCs are just staying in Castle Ravenloft, due to the positioning of Rahaden on the random encounter table, it will take them like a straight 48 hours of just being in the castle before they run a reasonable chance of encountering Rahaden, let alone Strahd. Like, the random encounters are just not going to run into anything notable most of the time. You can, by DM fiat, just have him there, but going by the book, it's pretty infeasible. Generally speaking, if you want to run an encounter with Rahaden, I say, go for it. I personally, I like the idea of keeping him in his study until he's quote unquote activated. Though if I in my own games and not just TB, I would have him be. Sorry, I had to sneeze. I would have him be activated, quote unquote, by say Strahd coming by and saying, "Hi, there's some dudes in our castle. Can you fuck them up?" As opposed to waiting for the PCs to get there. And part of the fun of that is
sorry to bother you.
Because as he has such a high stealth score, especially if once he's been activated, either because the PCs attacked him and he got away, or because he's been set off across the PCs like a bloodhound, he can just stalk them until they get into another encounter. And then sneak up behind them, slit someone's throat, hammer them with a psychic chorus, and then Misty step back away into the darkness and vanish into the shadows again.
Right.
Like, while they're in Ravenloft, the PCs can feel hunted, and that's really good.
If Rahaden is activated, or anyone for that matter, would the 2 people tag team the players and like attack from 2 fronts or something, or would Rahaden come in when Strahd is like in his break and hiding?
If you want to run it that way, I personally like using Rahaden as a complement to another encounter as opposed to an encounter on his own. So, like, for example, if the PCs triggered him, like in his study, and he was like fighting and wasn't in a good space, I would have him Misty step outside and then dash off to hide somewhere, or maybe lure them somewhere where he would have more reinforcements. And then, they know he's somewhere behind them. They don't know where he is. They don't know what he's doing. But he rolled a 26 on his stealth check, and he's not coming out until they get into another combat.
Okay.
Because Strahd, like Rahaden, is a former general and knows what the action economy is.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So, any other questions about combat before we head into Ravenloft?
Do it.
All right. So,
what do you think about unlimited fall damage?
Unlimited fall damage?
Very strange question.
I don't think there's anywhere in
Especially when chucking
Ravenloft for it to
people
really matter. I don't think you can take any more than 20 d6. Maybe like one or two places, but like most of them are not that tall. Like if you're talking about like throwing off the pillar stone of Ravenloft, like I could see that. But I don't see it come up often enough, especially because if someone like falls off the pillar stone of Ravenloft, I think it would really be on a case by case basis. But you know, it just in general, without that specific scenario, I would just run it rules as written because that's all you really need to do because you're not going to go too high.
Wait, yeah, all right. But I do think you can throw them right into the church village of Barovia, right? From layout. I'll check and send it into the
Not
Discord.
quite. According to the map, you'll drop them into a forested area that has a slope going down. There's like it's like this weird terraced cascading mountain thing that eventually ends at Barovia. But they wouldn't drop straight down. They would drop straight down onto the lower part of the mountain.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay, so moving on to Ravenloft. So I outlined this section up here, area to the castle. Before I start on it, just because of time reasons, is there anyone who feels notably confused or uncomfortable with navigating the castle? Because if not, I'll just skip this section.
I mean, I have only done one read through of the castle when I did my initial read through of the entire module. So I'm definitely fuzzy on it, but I'm also not really at that part of the game yet.
I'll just do a very quick overview then, because between all the secret doors and the staircases and everything, it can be kind of tricky to navigate. But the way that I like to look at it is that there is a public castle and there is a private or hidden castle. And the public castle is what the lords and the guests assume that, you know, Castle Ravenloft is an actual populated keep. The public castle is where they would go and have access to easily. And this is largely controlled by K21, the South Tower stair, that goes, at the top from the king's dining room, or all the way at the top from like the guest room in the Witch's Coven, down to the king's dining room and study, down to the down to the throne room, and down to the dining hall and main foyer, and then down again to the servants' hall and the larder, and then down again to the dungeons. And that's the public castle. That's where anyone can get to very easily, just going up and down that staircase. There are a few other fiddly bits like...
So K21, like, basically is your go-to for the regular spots.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like, as soon as they enter the foyer, they can go basically anywhere very easily that is even slightly adjoining K21. And that's something that can be difficult to get a handle on. I recommend looking at 2D maps to really get a sense of how everything lines up. But when you enter a castle, you're like, oh, the dungeons must be really difficult to get to. And, like, no, the dungeons are literally just 2 stories down from, like, the front entryway. It's very easy to get there. So, keeping in mind, that is where the lords and the guests might go on their day-to-day activities, easily enough. Go up to the guest room, go down to the dungeons, go up to the king's apartments, whatever. Then there's a private castle that is largely for the servants to navigate. And this is largely controlled by K20, the Heart of Sorrow staircase. This leads you to some of the back chambers, the servants' halls. This leads you down into the King's Men's Hall. Leads you down to the Chamberlain's office. All those little back areas that only the servants would really care about. And it's kind of private as well because that's where the Heart of Sorrow is. Especially if you go into the Chamberlain's office and take the hidden passage down, that'll take you, down toward the brazier room and the crypts. So like that's kind of this back, part of the castle that is not really accessible to the public. And there are a few connecting areas between them. The King's Apartments has a little doorway connecting the Heart of Sorrow to Strahd's study. There's like a hidden doorway somewhere that I forget about, and like you can cross over like the bridge between the tower where the coven and the guest room is to get to the Heart of Sorrow tower. But like generally speaking, there are only a few portals that connect those two regions. And again, just using 2D maps to see how everything lays on top of each other and mentally separating anything out in your head, highly recommend to get a coherent sense of the layout. And if you're having trouble visualizing things, this is a shameless plug for a Patreon of a friend that I recently discovered. Benios Battle Maps. You might have seen his work on the Curse of Strahd subreddit. It's absolutely gorgeous. I installed it and downloaded it on Foundry myself the other day. It comes pre-made with Foundry stuff. I can, easily with a click navigate from one room to another, battle map to battle map, floor to floor, just teleporting tokens around the place.
Holy.
It's 3D. It's animated. There are like animated scenes, so like you can actually see what the Hall of Bones looks like from a isometric angle, as if you were actually standing in that room, and it's beautiful. And so you can just do a walkthrough of the castle and only switch to a battle map when there's actual combat. It's great.
Wow.
Highly recommend. And even just watching the videos on his channel and the trailers, even if you're not a patron, do a stunning job of bringing the castle to life. Highly recommend.
He's using Unreal Engine, isn't he?
I think so, yeah.
So I'm gonna go check him out.
There's a lot of great stuff. Means of entry, I'll just cover this quickly. There are 5 main ways into the castle. There's the front door, which leads into the foyer. There's the servants' door, which leads into the servants' entrance, and that kind of. And you can see how those divide up, right? The front door leads to the public castle. The servants' door leads into the private castle, and things just kind of unfold from there. There's the overlook. If you kind of fly around, I've had the Keepers of the Feather kind of fly the PCs to the overlook in more than one game, just kind of dropping them off in the back gardens. There's the crypt window, if you want to fly a little bit lower and smash in through the crypts into King Barav and Queen Ravenovia's place and kind of make your way through the catacombs. Or you can just land on the tower roof above the Witch's Coven and then either cross the bridge to the Heart of Sorrow or descend down into the lower floors via K21. Those are the 5 main ways the PCs might enter the castle. And you'll note that 3 of them require flight. Random encounters territories of the castle. This is pretty expeditious. I personally like seeding encounters intentionally. You might have seen my post or the section in Reloaded about separating the castle into territories. I like turning the brides into sort of like mini bosses, such that Anastasia controls the king's apartments, Ludmilla controls the witch's coven. Ludmilla is kind of queen of traps in like the private areas of the castle and like some of the second floor areas. And like Escher is like doing his own thing, and like Rahadin controls the dungeons and so on. And that kind of makes each area feel more unique, especially if you specialize the random encounters to be found there. Like Ludmilla, she's got this witchy thing going on, so there are brooms there. Anastasia is kind of queen commander of the undead, so she's got wights defending her, and so on. And I feel like that really accentuates the uniqueness. If you place those encounters very intentionally, as opposed to just rolling them and letting the PCs, rampage wherever they might go. I've gone back and forth with this, but I think that, making good use of the traps that conjure Strahd, the Flight of the Vampire, and the Major Illusion, they're jump scares, the Major Illusion being the one on the secret stairs below Rahadin's office. They're jump scares yet, but they are good excuses to get your PCs to expend resources to keep them on their toes. And, if you've seen my Trajectory of Fear video, they give you a brief moment of terror, if not horror, that quickly diffuses back, keeping that tension alive and reminding the PCs of what they could stand to lose if it hadn't been fake. Short and long rests. Speaking rules is written, obviously everything's a matter of the random encounter tables, but in general, and if I had my druthers, the biggest questions for short and long rests are, is Strahd active? If it's a short rest that they're trying to take, if they haven't yet encountered Strahd and they haven't done anything that could attract them to them, like activating the elevator trap, I would probably, I might roll in the encounter tables to see if Strahd shows up. But, I would probably let them have, 1 or 2 short rests in the castle before triggering Strahd. Unless he had some reason to know that they were in the castle. Long rests, if they take they don't get a long rest in the castle. Someone is going to find them. Strahd is going to find out they're there, and he's going to fuck them up and make them have a bad time. So I would never let a party get away with getting a long rest on the Ravenloft. And once Strahd is activated, he's not going to let them finish a short rest. It's just not going to happen. Like, literally, because of the way short rests are worded, all he needs to do is sling a single ray of frost, and that PC's short rest is over. Like, that's it. You gotta start over. So, yeah. We talked about random encounter probabilities, locking the PCs inside, the dining hall trap. I've talked a little bit about how the dinner is a community creation, and as written, it is purely a trap to lure the PCs there. If you are using that, or if you want some equivalent, where Strahd brings the PCs to the castle, they go into the dining hall, they talk with the illusion, and then the illusion vanishes, the lights go out, the drawbridge goes up, the doors close, etc., etc. I think it's a very powerful moment for scaring the PCs, especially if they went there at a low level. But do keep in mind that if they have the fly spell, it's literally worthless because they can just fly across the chasm with or without the drawbridge. So, something to keep in mind.
Wait, am I understanding this correctly? That you, even if you don't use the dinner as a trap and have the PCs just walk into Ravenloft, still have a illusion pretend to do a dinner and then lock them inside and do dinner as written?
No. So what I mean by that is that if you choose to use something similar to the rules as written book,
Okay.
and that might be something as simple as Strahd, Strahd inviting them there, then they attack him, and then he just kind of like says like, "Oh, I guess you're stuck in Ravenloft now. I'll see you around," and he like vanishes, and then the drawbridges go up because like they attacked him in the middle of dinner. Keep in mind that if they have the fly spell or dispel magic to get the drawbridge down, like it's not going to be very effective. So keep an eye on your players' character sheets. But if they don't have those things, they're basically trapped unless they get to the brazier, which they're going to have to do.
So maybe this is a good time to talk about them being trapped and how to escape.
Yes, so if you're trapped in Ravenloft, that is, if the drawbridge is up, there are 3 ways to escape. 4 ways, actually. Number 1, cast Dispel Magic. Let me just check to make sure that this works. It actually might not work. I remember I've looked at it a few times, so let me pull that up in my handy-dandy module here. Gate Tower. Okay, yes. If your players... So the first way to escape, if the drawbridge is closed, is cast Dispel Magic twice on each of the gate towers that are magically locked, so that the drawbridge can come down again. Second way to do it, cast the fly spell and just sort of ferry on like your biggest, bulkiest party member, just kind of ferry the players back and forth across the chasm. Third way to do it is if you manage to get climbing equipment for everyone in the party, or just people that you want to escape, you can just have them literally climb down the Pillarstone of Ravenloft. I'd probably make that a skill challenge or something, but you could feasibly do it. And that would just plop them down like somewhere, like they could climb down to Barovia or something, or like Sairpool. And the fourth way to do it would just be using the Brazier teleportation. So if they don't have the spell magic, they don't have the fly spell, and they don't have climbing equipment, their only way out is the Brazier. That's literally their only way out.
And the brazier is the brazier is in the kind of the crypt area. That's kind of the hidden part of the castle, you would say. Is that right?
It's kind of on the border. If they can make it past the dungeon water traps, it's pretty trivial to get there. But it's pretty tough to get past the dungeon water traps because they are ludicrously unfair. So
okay,
but you can get there. It's not entirely hidden. It's just a little out of the way.
The reason I'm asking is my group is probably going to go rescue Irina in the future, and my thought is that she's not been sitting there as a stranded princess. She's been casing the joint, figuring out how to get out. And I can't tell if she would have been able to figure out how to get into the brazier of teleportation room, or would learn anything about it.
I would say that she could have if she had had some means of exploring the castle. Because just thinking of a route that she could have taken, she's not heavy enough to trigger the elevator trap. So if she takes K21 down to the larders, enters the Hall of Bones, checks out Rahadin's office while he's not there, and finds the hidden door left open, she goes through the hidden door, finds the brazier room, reads the poem, and then just comes back upstairs to her apartments. Or Rahadin tells her you shouldn't be down here, and escorts her back upstairs. That's something you could feasibly have happen.
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise I would have.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. What's up?
No, you mentioned the keepers flying the players in. Would you have them fly them out, or would they just retreat? In this
It's a good question. If they've befriended the Keepers of the Feather, the Keepers trust them, and the Keepers somehow know that the players are there. And I would only do that if you'd mentioned that there was a raven following them or something, which you can easily do. But also it's tough because how the Keepers going to know where to meet the players. I don't think the Keepers would break into Ravenloft for a prison break. If the players sent them a message through sending or something, if they had a cleric in the party and said hey, meet us in the Overlook to help us escape, I could see it happening. But they're not going to break into the castle Ravenloft to free the players from prison.
Oh no, sure. But if the players are in courtyard part 1 and the Keepers are on another roof, any firebolt spell would essentially be a flare, right? Like a flare gun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Um,
I've actually done that.
I mean, it
where
could be a trap.
keepers fly my players in. Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Interesting. I'll think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the keepers are incredibly powerful. Like getting them on your side is an incredibly strong alliance to make. So yeah.
With the Brazier Room, do you have any recommendations on changing the destinations? Like, it's kind of weird, that one of the locations is the Abbey, right? And right, so I'm probably gonna change that. Wondering if anyone else has thought about that.
I'm personally fine with the locations the way they are. I mean, they're really all the points of interest that Strahd could possibly have. You could make an argument for changing one of them to the village of Barovia, but like with them, like the important thing is that he can easily get anywhere in Barovia very, very quickly. He can get to Vallaki, he can get to the Emperor Temple or Mount Gakis, he can get to Kresk, and like from those locations alone, like in bat form, or on Bucephalus, he can very easily get to anywhere that he wants. So, like Selika Pass to Berez or Argynvostolt, or Vallaki to Old Bone Grinder, or to Lake Zarevich, or Kresk to the Werewolf Den. I think I would not change it unless you want to severely limit his mobility, or unless you're willing to give him some sort of equivalent to make up for it.
Got it. That's a good feedback. I appreciate that.
Sure thing. So, just to quickly touch on the question that someone had earlier about using Ravenloft in different aspects. For me, and this is in the Ravenloft Reloaded guide, which I encourage you to take a look at if you haven't already, there are basically 3 opportunities where I see the PCs going into Ravenloft, especially in the Reloaded context or any other community homebrew sense. The dinner with Strahd around 4th or 5th level. The heist to rescue Irina, get Argynvost's skull, get the holy symbol, or whatever Troker readings out of the crypts, and then obviously the final battle, which would either be prompted by, say, the PCs deciding to kill Strahd, or like Strahd kidnapping hostages, or something along those lines. And I think for me, it's important to sort of slowly reveal Ravenloft over time. With the dinner, Strahd gives them a guided tour. It's very restrictive, but it gives them a sense of some of the general layout of the public areas, lets them know some of the characters inside. The heist is where they get to kind of explore on their own. Personally, I try to give the players an opportunity to heist Ravenloft while Strahd is not present, while they know he's not present. Either because he's at Yester Hill looking into the Wall of Fog, or because he's collecting a blood tax from Vallaki under Voctor's control, something like that, so that they can get him out of the castle. Although I've run games where they knew he was going to collect the blood tax, but he found out from one of his spies that they were coming to the castle, so he decided to send a disguised Rahadin in his place, and just kind of hung around in vassally disguise, seeing if they would find him, and just kind of fucked with them while they were in the castle. He actually disguised himself as Cyrus and had a blast with it, because Strahd doesn't really want to kill them. He's still having fun with them until the last possible minute. Once they get the Sun Sword and in the late game, he's sure he's going to try to kill them, or get them to the castle so he can kill them. But before then, he just wants to have a good time. So he honestly kidnapping Irina, he knows he can get her back. Taking Argynvost's skull, it's just some old bones. He doesn't care about it. They're of no importance. Getting the Troka items, maybe, but he didn't know that they were there in the first place. So, or probably didn't know that they were there in the first place. So, even in that scenario, if Strahd is still in the castle and your players are either A, risking it, or B, think that he's somewhere else, you can easily just have them kind of romping around Ravenloft and have Strahd fuck with them. I had this great scene where Strahd turned into Cyrus and led the PCs into the elevator trap just to fuck with them, and then disappeared into the wall laughing like a creepy fucker. It was great. They were horrified. Strahd had a great time.
I know that Reloaded leans more into dark fantasy elements, where Raw leans a little more towards gothic horror. Do you still recommend incentivizing going to Ravenloft pre-finale if you're running it more gothic horror?
I think that's certainly possible. I mean, especially with the dinner, and if you're running it closer to rules as written, in Twice Bitten, let's say, if they had gotten Irina into Sergei's hands at the pool, and she'd vanished, they would have got the dinner invite early. And let's assume, even though they probably wouldn't have, let's assume they accept the invitation. Going by the random encounter tables, they would not have encountered Strahd, but they wouldn't have the fly spell, so they would have had to use the Brazier to escape. And they would have really had a chance to kind of romp around Ravenloft. And the fun thing about Ravenloft is that aside from the vampire spawn encounter, which you can very easily solve by holding yourself up in a room and locking the door, and playing intelligently, Like, there's not a lot of stuff in Castle Ravenloft that can actually endanger you. A lot of it's just attrition. And if Strahd is not at the end of it, then you're probably going to get out okay. It's just going to be really terrifying and really horrific. And especially if you're going in there to, like, get Argynvoth's skull or get a Troika item or whatever, I think it can absolutely work. It's a great little adventure.
Okay, good to know.
I would highly recommend reading the, what is it? I have it here. Escape from Castle Ravenloft. It is a D&D 5e choose your own adventure book that features a cleric of, I think, Tyr, trapped in Castle Ravenloft and her efforts to escape. It is a really fun adventure and gives you a lot of inspiration for running that sort of, low-level escape from the castle.
Ooh.
So, that's all I have to say on those subjects. If there's anything we missed, feel free to let me know. If you have any other questions, what have you guys got?
That was really cool. Thanks, man.
Glad to hear.
I am now looking over the Benios battle maps Patreon, and good lord,
It's
so much cool stuff.
it's literally cooler than I can reasonably communicate. Actually, you know what? While I have you guys here, let me see if I can do something cool, just to show it off to you guys.
Yeah, those maps make me want to switch to virtual tabletop.
Give me a second to pull up my Foundry here.
Would you use these battle maps for something like the dinner tours, or are they strictly final battle exploring Ravenloft?
It's got the Benios ones are for everything. Forge is being fairly slow to load right now. There we go. Let me launch the game. Just give me a second to get it working. It should be easy enough. Hopefully, I installed it a few days ago just as a proof of concept, just to make sure it all worked. And it took a little bit of finagling. But Benios has a Discord. He's very responsive. He's got some very helpful moderators.
Ooh.
Here we go. So let me.
Oh my god, the music plays on load.
Right?
I did everything I couldn't do.
So let me full screen this and then switch on the recording
Take notes,
again.
everyone.
No kidding.
Let me actually switch over to the scene here. Where was it? Here we go.
No, I was just confident in my Foundry organization. Now I'm
Jeez
seeing this.
Louise.
All right, let me turn on the stream again. So that I'm
Wow.
recording this. So this is what it looks like.
Holy Moses.
And let me turn on the journal entry so we can see those. There are handouts. Here is, I can switch to the battle map. Top-down battle map. You can see, from my DM view, I can easily teleport players to different rooms.
Holy.
Let me switch back to the scene. And also, it came preloaded. I had zero setup work to do. It's just a Foundry module that comes with it. Let's move to the, let's go to the Kingsman Hall.
Good lord.
We'll go to the battle map.
Okay, this is blowing my mind hardcore.
It's nuts.
Yeah, this is very tasty.
I
Okay,
just
I
finished
really
Light of
need to-
Sidewalls. What are you doing,
Wow.
Dragna?
I'm going to need to switch to VTT.
And these are like, what, $8 a pack, I think is his tier 4 price?
$10 for the full Foundry integration, I think, or maybe $8.50.
Wow.
This is the servants'
Well,
hall.
I know what I'm going to use with my Strahd Must Die Tonight run. Damn.
Let's move
Kidding.
to the kitchen. It's beautiful. Oh, and of course, battle map.
Yeah. Foundry VTT option is $8.50 per pack.
That's a steal. That's
Oh, and I think I have the elevator trap installed. Let me see if I can pull that up. Yes!
Oh my god!
no way.
Yep. So, I think I'll leave it on that note.
Oh man.
Do you have a suggestion? Because this looks very abstract. You're just looking at a very small picture. Do you have any other maps laying next to you, like a different set of maps that give you a full overview of the whole castle in printed out form or something?
I tend to use the... There are any number of maps. There are a few 2D maps that I have linked in my Reloaded guide to the castle. I like the Pig on the Wing ones, but there are a few other like paid ones that you can find on DM's Guild that are very nice. So, yeah, I think this is as good a place
so who
to end
needs
as any.
sleep anyways? I'll just download those, I guess, now.
Yep, and if you need any help, let me know, because I just worked it out the other day. And if not around, you can also join the Benios Discord server. They're very helpful.
Definitely go let Benios know that he's probably got at least a few new patrons incoming.
Yeah,
Goodness.
definitely. Has he made the whole story yet?
He's finished everything except for, I think he's on the 3rd floor, but he hasn't yet done the towers. He's done everything else, though. He just put out the crypts. So, I have full faith that by the time that TB actually gets there, he'll have finished the towers. He seems to be doing it pretty regularly. He works fast.
He's even got some videos on there free to the public that kind of show his build process and stuff, like an actual time lapse of him building the levels and things. It looks really cool.
Yep.
Jeez Louise.
All right, well, I'm going to cut off the recording here, and if you want to hang out in the chat for a little bit, you can. But hopefully this was helpful, enjoyable, and informative. And I'll see you guys for the next month's workshop.
Right on.
Yeah.
Oh, and hey, since we're on voice, congrats on breaking 100, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, good job.
I've been absolutely blown away. I've got something exciting coming up for that. I've got a few different things that I'll be putting out soon, as I have the time to work on the actual promo for it. So I might sync it up with Twitter. So keep an eye out.
Are we officially going to change our name to the Drag Queens then?
Oh God! On that note, I'm ending this recording.